The red dust of Theron 7 swirled around Maya Thompson's boots as she followed the Altarian research team through the ancient ruins. The towering stone structures had stood here for thousands of years, weathered by time and the planet's harsh winds. Maya carried her sample collection kit and scanning equipment, trying to keep up with the long-legged aliens who moved with graceful efficiency through the crumbling corridors. Dr. Keth led the expedition, his silver skin gleaming in the pale sunlight that filtered through the broken ceiling above. Like all Altarians, he stood nearly 7 feet tall but weighed less than Maya, despite her human frame being much shorter. His people had evolved on a world with low gravity and no predators, creating beings of incredible intelligence but fragile bodies. They had mastered space travel when humans were still learning to make fire. The electromagnetic readings are strongest in the lower chambers, Dr. Keth announced, his voice carrying the musical quality typical of his species. We should find the source of the ancient power signatures there. Maya nodded and checked her equipment. The human xenobiology program had fought hard to get her placed on this expedition. Most Altarian research teams barely tolerated human observers, viewing them as primitive newcomers to galactic civilization. Maya had spent 3 years proving herself worthy of this opportunity. The team descended through a narrow stairway carved from black stone. Maya's flashlight beam revealed walls covered in strange symbols that seemed to shift and dance in the moving light. The Altarians used their advanced scanning devices to record everything, their technology so far beyond human capabilities that Maya felt like a child watching adults work. Dr. Valen, the expedition's archaeological specialist, paused at a junction where 3 corridors met. His large, dark eyes studied the readings on his scanner. The energy source appears to be down the central passage, he said. However, I am detecting some unusual resonance patterns. Unusual how? Dr. Keth asked. The frequency suggests the power source may still be active after all these millennia. We should proceed with caution. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool underground air. She had studied enough ancient sites to know that active technology in ruins usually meant danger, but the Altarians seemed confident in their advanced equipment and protective suits. They moved down the central corridor in single file. Maya brought up the rear, her human instincts making her constantly check behind them. The corridor gradually widened into a vast chamber with a domed ceiling that disappeared into darkness above. In the center of the room stood a massive crystalline structure that pulsed with a faint blue light. Fascinating, Dr. Keth breathed. The crystalline matrix appears to be a power storage device of some kind. The technology is unlike anything in our databases. The Altarians spread out around the crystal, their scanners humming as they took readings from every angle. Maya stayed near the entrance, feeling increasingly uneasy. Something about this place felt wrong, though she could not put her finger on what bothered her. Dr. Thompson, Dr. Valen called. Please collect some samples from the debris around the base of the crystal. Your human durability makes you better suited for physical specimen gathering. Maya bristled at the casual dismissal but moved forward to do as requested. The Altarians always assigned her the manual labor while they handled the sophisticated analysis. She knelt near the crystal's base and began carefully collecting fragments of stone and metal into her sample containers. As she worked, Maya noticed that the crystal's pulsing was growing brighter and faster. She looked up at the Altarians, but they were absorbed in their readings and seemed unaware of the change. The air in the chamber began to vibrate with a low humming sound that she felt in her bones. Dr. Keth, Maya called out. I think something is happening with the crystal. Continue your work, Dr. Thompson, he replied without looking up from his scanner. We are recording some remarkable energy fluctuations. The humming grew louder and the crystal's light shifted from blue to a brilliant white. Maya's human instinct screamed at her to run, but she forced herself to stay calm. The Altarians were the experts here, not her. Suddenly, the crystal emitted a pulse of energy that made every piece of electronic equipment in the chamber spark and die. The Altarians cried out in alarm as their scanners went dark and their protective suits lost power. In the sudden silence that followed, Maya heard a new sound that made her blood run cold. The grinding of stone against stone echoed through the chamber as ancient mechanisms activated throughout the ruins. Massive blocks began sliding down from hidden recesses in the walls and ceiling. The entrance they had used to enter the chamber sealed itself with a thunderous crash. The exit is blocked. Dr. Valen shouted, his musical voice cracking with panic. More. Stones fell from above, and the Altarians scattered in terror as the chamber became a death trap. Maya dove to one side as a huge block crashed down where she had been kneeling. The crystal's light flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness except for the fading glow of Maya's human flashlight. "This way!" Dr. Keth called from somewhere. In the darkness, there is another passage on the far side. Maya stumbled through the falling debris, following the sound of the Altarians' voices. She could hear them crying out in fear as they tried to navigate the collapsing chamber with their failed technology. A chunk of ceiling struck her shoulder, sending sharp pain down her arm. But she kept moving. She reached what seemed to be another corridor just as a massive section of the ceiling collapsed behind her. The impact shook the entire structure and she lost her footing, tumbling down a steep slope in complete darkness. She hit the bottom hard, her flashlight spinning away and shattering against the stone walls. Maya lay still for a moment, checking for serious injuries. Her shoulder throbbed where the stone had hit her, and she could feel warm blood soaking through her shirt. Something sharp had pierced her flesh during the fall, but she seemed to be in one piece, otherwise in the absolute darkness above her. She could hear the Altarians calling to each other in their musical language. Their voices were high with panic, and she could tell they were lost without their technology. Maya tried to call out to them, but her voice was swallowed by the vast spaces of the ruined structure. She was alone, bleeding and trapped in an ancient alien ruin with no way to contact the outside world. Her equipment was destroyed, and her sophisticated alien colleagues were helpless without their failed technology. For the first time since joining the expedition, Maya realized that her human heritage might be the only thing that could save them all. Maya pressed her hand against her wounded shoulder and felt the warm wetness of blood seeping through her fingers. The pain was sharp but manageable, nothing compared to the injuries she had survived during her childhood on the frontier colonies. She forced herself to focus on her immediate situation rather than the throbbing in her arm. The darkness around her was complete, but Maya had learned long ago not to panic when she could not see. She closed her eyes and listened carefully too, the sounds echoing through the ruins above her. The Altarians were still calling to each other, their voices carrying a note of desperation that made her stomach clench with worry. She opened her eyes and let them adjust to the darkness while she explored her surroundings by touch. Her fingers found rough stone walls on 3 sides, but the 4th side seemed to open into a wider space. She had fallen into some kind of side passage or maintenance tunnel that connected to the main chamber system. Maya pulled off her torn shirt and used it to bind her wounded shoulder as tightly as she could manage. The bleeding slowed but did not stop completely. She would need to find proper medical supplies soon, but first she had to figure out where she was and how to reach her colleagues. As she prepared to move, a new sound reached her ears that made every muscle in her body tense with alarm. Something large was moving through the tunnels above, and it was not making the light footsteps of the Altarians. Whatever was up there moved with heavy, deliberate steps that suggested a predator stalking its prey. Maya heard Dr. Keth cry out in terror, his musical voice rising to a shriek that cut through her like a knife. The sound was followed by a roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the ancient structure. She knew with horrible certainty that the expedition was no longer alone in the ruins. Every instinct in her human brain screamed at her to run, to hide, to save herself while she still could. But Maya had not survived her harsh colonial upbringing by abandoning people who needed help. She began moving through the dark tunnel, feeling her way along the walls as she searched for a way back to the main chamber system. The tunnel gradually sloped upward, and she found herself climbing over piles of rubble that had fallen from above during the collapse. Sharp edges of broken stone cut her hands and knees, but she ignored the minor injuries and kept moving. The sounds of terror from above grew louder as she climbed. Maya reached a junction where her tunnel met a larger passage. Faint light filtered down from somewhere ahead, probably from emergency illumination in the Altarian equipment that was still functioning. She could hear movement in the passage, but she could not tell if it was her colleagues or something else. She picked up a piece of broken stone that fit comfortably in her hand and crept forward toward the light. The passage opened into a circular chamber with several other tunnels branching off in different directions. Emergency lights on the walls cast a dim red glow that was just bright enough for her to see her surroundings. Dr. Valen stood pressed against the far wall, his large eyes wide with terror as he stared at something Maya could not see from her position. His silver skin had turned pale and his whole body was trembling. Whatever had frightened him was just around the corner from where Maya crouched in the tunnel entrance. She heard a low growling sound and caught her first glimpse of the creature that was stalking the Altarians. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, on powerful legs that ended in claws designed for gripping stone. Its body was covered in dark fur that seemed to absorb the red emergency lighting, making it almost invisible in the shadows. A long tail with a barbed tip swayed behind it as it moved. Maya had never seen anything like it in any xenobiology database, but her human instincts recognized it immediately as an apex predator. Everything about the creature spoke of millions of years of evolution spent hunting and killing in exactly this type of environment. Its head turned toward Dr. Valen, and Maya saw rows of razor-sharp teeth that could tear through Altarian flesh like paper. The creature was playing with its prey, moving slowly to savor the fear of the helpless scientist. It clearly had no experience with anything that might fight back. Maya realized that these predators had probably been trapped in the ruins when the ancient security systems activated, surviving for generations by hunting whatever small creatures lived in the underground passages. Maya gripped her makeshift weapon tighter and tried to think like the colonial fighters who had taught her to survive. The creature was bigger and stronger than her, but it was also overconfident. It had never faced anything like a human before, anything that would fight back with intelligence and desperation combined. She took a deep breath and stepped out of the tunnel entrance. The creature's head snapped toward her and its eyes reflected the red light like mirrors. For a moment, predator and human stared at each other across the chamber while Dr. Valen cowered against the wall. Maya did not try to analyze the creature's weak points or calculate her chances of survival. Those were Altarian methods of thinking, and they would only slow her down. Instead, she let millions of years of human evolution take control of her actions. She screamed, a sound of pure fury and challenge that echoed through the chamber like a battle cry. The creature's ears flattened against its head, and it took a step backward, clearly startled by this unexpected response. Nothing in its hunting experience had prepared it for prey that made such aggressive sounds. Maya charged forward with the stone raised high above her head. The creature tried to swipe at her with its claws, but she was already inside its reach and moving too fast for it to adjust. She drove the jagged edge of the stone deep into the soft flesh of its throat. Black blood sprayed across the chamber. As the creature staggered backward, making a choking sound that was almost like surprise, Maya did not give it time to recover. She followed up with her bare hands, clawing at its eyes and tearing at its wounds with a viciousness that shocked even her. The creature fell to the stone floor with a crash that shook the chamber. Maya stood over its body, breathing hard and covered in its blood. The rush of adrenaline made her feel more alive than she had in years. Dr. Valen stared at her with an expression of amazement and fear. He had just watched a being he considered primitive kill an apex predator with nothing but a piece of stone and raw determination. Maya wiped the blood from her hands on the creature's fur and looked around for more weapons. "Where are the others?" she asked. Dr. Valen pointed toward one of the tunnels with a shaking hand. Maya picked up one of the creature's claws that had broken off during the fight and tested its sharpness against her thumb. It would make an excellent cutting tool. "Stay close to me," she told the terrified Altarian. "And do exactly what I tell you to do." For the first time in the expedition, Dr. Valen followed a human's orders without question. Maya moved through the tunnels with Dr. Valen close behind her, the Altarians breathing quick and shallow with fear. She had armed herself with the creature's claw and another sharp piece of stone, but more importantly she had begun thinking like a hunter instead of prey. Every shadow could hide an enemy. Every sound could signal danger or opportunity. The red emergency lights created a maze of light and darkness that would have confused most beings. But Maya had grown up in similar conditions on the frontier colonies. She used the shadows to her advantage, moving silently from one patch of darkness to the next while keeping Dr. Valen close enough to protect. They followed the sound of voices. Deeper into the tunnel system, Maya could hear at least 2 more Altarians somewhere ahead, their musical calls echoing off the stone walls. But she could also hear other sounds that made her grip her weapons tighter. Heavy breathing that did not come from Altarian lungs, and the soft scraping of claws against stone. "How many more of those creatures are there?" Maya whispered to Dr. Valen. "I do not know," he replied, his voice barely audible. "Our scanners detected no life signs when we entered the ruins, but the electromagnetic interference must have hidden them from our sensors." Maya nodded. The Altarians had become so dependent on their technology that they had forgotten how to observe their environment with their own senses. They would never have survived on a world like Theron 7 without their machines to protect them. They reached another junction where 3 passages met. Maya pressed herself against the wall and listened, carefully to determine which direction the voices were coming from. Dr. Valen stood behind her, trying to control his trembling as he waited for her to make a decision. A scream echoed from the passage on their left, followed by the sound of something heavy hitting the ground. Maya cursed under her breath and motioned for Dr. Valen to stay where he was. She crept toward the sound. Keeping low and moving as quietly as possible, the passage opened into a large chamber where Dr. Keth and another Altarian scientist were trapped on a raised platform in the center of the room. 2 of the predator creatures circled below them, their claws clicking against the stone floor as they looked for a way to reach their prey. Maya studied the situation and realized that the creatures were in no hurry to finish their hunt. They seemed to enjoy the fear of their victims, probably because they had been trapped in these ruins for so long with little to hunt. The Altarians represented the most interesting prey they had encountered in generations. Dr. Keth spotted Maya in the tunnel entrance and his eyes widened with hope. He started to call out to her, but she quickly raised her hand to signal silence. The last thing she needed was to alert the creatures to her presence before she was ready to act. Maya retreated back to where Dr. Valen waited and began searching through the rubble on the tunnel floor. She found several pieces of metal that had fallen from the ceiling during the collapse, including a long rod that would serve as a spear if she could attach a sharp point to it. "What are you doing?" Dr. Valen whispered. "Making weapons," Maya replied as she used the creature's claw to carve notches in the metal rod. "Your people have forgotten that sometimes the simplest tools are the most effective." She bound one of the sharp stones to the end of the rod with strips torn from her pants, creating a crude but functional spear. The weight felt good in her hands, and she tested the balance by making a few practice thrusts. "I need you to create a distraction," Maya told Dr. Valen. "Make noise in the tunnel behind us, but stay hidden. When the creatures come to investigate, I will attack them from the side." Dr. Valen looked terrified at the thought of deliberately attracting the predator's attention, but he nodded and moved back down the tunnel. Maya crept forward to the chamber entrance and waited for her signal. The sound of falling stones echoed from the tunnel as Dr. Valen knocked over a pile of rubble. Both creatures immediately turned toward the noise, their hunting instincts drawing them away from their trapped prey. They moved with the fluid grace of natural predators, but Maya could see that they were overconfident after years of hunting defenseless creatures. Maya stepped into the chamber just as the first creature reached the tunnel entrance. She drove her spear deep into its side, using her forward momentum to punch the stone point through its hide and into its vital organs. The creature roared in pain and surprise, but Maya was already moving. She released the spear and rolled to one side. As the second creature charged toward her, Its claws raked across the stone where she had been standing, sending sparks flying in the dim light. Maya came up with the broken claw in her hand and slashed across the creature's legs, severing tendons and sending it crashing to the ground. The first creature was still alive but mortally wounded, thrashing weakly as black blood pooled beneath its body. Maya retrieved her spear and finished it with a quick thrust to the base of its skull. The second creature tried to crawl toward her despite its crippled legs, but she ended its suffering with another precise strike. Dr. Keth and his colleagues stared down at Maya from their platform, their expressions showing a mixture of amazement and fear. They had just watched a human kill 2 apex predators in less than a minute using nothing but primitive weapons and tactics that their advanced civilization had never needed to develop. "How did you do that?" Dr. Keth asked as Maya helped them down from the platform. "Your people think survival is about having the best technology," Maya replied, pulling her spear free from the creature's body. "Humans learned that survival is about being willing to do whatever it takes to stay alive." She looked around the chamber and spotted several more pieces of metal and stone that could be fashioned into weapons. "We need to arm ourselves and find the rest of your team. These were not the only predators in these ruins." Dr. Keth picked up a piece of sharp stone and examined it doubtfully. "This seems rather primitive compared to our usual equipment." "Your usual equipment is dead," Maya pointed out. "Right now, primitive might be exactly what we need." She began showing the Altarians how to select and prepare makeshift weapons, her hands moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who had learned these skills as a matter of survival. The graceful scientists watched her with growing respect as they realized that what they had dismissed as primitive behavior was actually a sophisticated understanding of violence and survival. "There is something else you need to understand," Maya said as she helped Dr. Valen fashion a crude knife from a piece of metal. "These creatures hunt alone or in pairs because they have never needed to work together. We are going to hunt them as a pack." For the first time since the expedition began, the Altarians found themselves taking orders from a human. And for the first time in their lives, they understood why their species had never produced any great warriors. They had never needed to learn how to fight for their survival. Maya looked at her small group of armed scientists and felt a grim satisfaction. They were still outnumbered by whatever other predators lurked in the ruins, but they were no longer helpless prey. They had become something that these ancient hunting grounds had never seen before. They had become human. Maya led her small group of armed Altarians through the dark tunnels, teaching them lessons their advanced civilization had never needed to learn. She showed them how to step on the sides of their feet to reduce noise, how to test each surface before putting their full weight on it, and how to use their long limbs to move through tight spaces without making sound. "Your people are naturally graceful," she whispered to Dr. Keth as they paused at another junction. "You just need to learn to use that grace for hunting instead of just for ceremony." The Altarians were quick learners when their lives depended on it. Dr. Valen had become surprisingly good at moving silently through the shadows, while Dr. Keth showed an unexpected talent for spotting potential ambush sites. Their scientist minds adapted rapidly to thinking about predator and prey, relationships from a personal perspective rather than an academic one. They found the next member of their team in a side chamber, where he had taken refuge behind a barricade. Of fallen stones, Dr. Lex was the expedition's technology specialist, and he looked close to panic as his sophisticated equipment lay dead and useless around him. His relief at seeing the others was so intense that he nearly cried. "Thank the stars you found me," he said as Maya helped him over the barricade. "Something killed Dr. Jan in the passage outside. I heard him screaming, but when I went to help, there was nothing left but blood on the walls." Maya felt her stomach tighten at the news. They had lost one team member already, and she had no way of knowing how many more predators were hunting in the tunnel system. But she also noticed something else in Dr. Lex's voice. He was looking to her for leadership instead of to his fellow Altarians. "Did you see the creature that killed him?" she asked. "Only glimpses," Dr. Lex replied. "It was larger than the others, and it seemed more intelligent. It set a trap for Dr. Yan, using sounds to lure him into an ambush. Maya nodded grimly. Pack hunters often had an alpha that was bigger and smarter than the rest. If these predators had developed pack tactics during their generations of isolation, the remaining team members were in even greater danger than she had thought. She armed Dr. Lex with a spear similar to the one she carried and spent several minutes teaching him the basics of using it. The Altarian's hands shook as he held the crude weapon, but his fear was beginning to transform into something else. Maya recognized the look in his eyes. It was the same expression she had seen in colonial fighters when they realized they could fight back against impossible odds. "We need to find Dr. Nara and Dr. Zim," Dr. Keth said. "They were with Dr. Yan when we became separated." Maya studied the layout of the tunnels around them and tried to think like both hunter and prey. The predators would have established territory in the most defensible parts of the ruins, probably in areas with multiple escape routes and good acoustics for detecting intruders. The surviving Altarians would have sought shelter in the most secure locations they could find. "The main power chamber," she said suddenly. "If your colleagues are still alive, they would have gone there. It has only one entrance, and the walls are thick enough to muffle sound." Dr. Valen looked doubtful. "But that chamber is in the deepest part of the ruins. To reach it, we would have to pass through the main hunting grounds of these creatures." "Exactly," Maya replied. "Which means the predators would not expect us to go there deliberately. We use their own territory against them." She began moving deeper into the tunnel system, and the Altarians followed without question. They had learned to trust her instincts even when those instincts led them toward greater danger. Maya felt the weight of their faith in her abilities, but she also felt something else, the satisfaction of leading a hunting party toward its prey. The tunnels grew wider as they descended, and Maya realized they were entering the older sections of the ruins. The walls here were covered with the same strange symbols they had seen in the upper chambers, but these carvings seemed to pulse with a faint energy that made her skin crawl. They heard the first signs of the pack before they saw them. Low growls echoed through the passages ahead, along with the sound of claws scraping against stone. Maya raised her hand to halt the group and listened carefully to determine how many creatures they were facing. "At least 4, she whispered. "Maybe 5. They are spread out in a hunting formation." Dr. Keth gripped his makeshift weapon tighter. "Should we try to find another route?" "No," Maya replied. "Running will only make us easier prey. We go through them, but we do it smart." She studied the tunnel layout and began explaining her plan. The Altarians would split into 2 groups and approach the pack from different directions. Maya would create a distraction that would draw the predators into the open, where the superior reach of the Altarian spears would give them an advantage. "Remember," she told them, "these creatures have never faced coordinated opposition. They hunt alone or in pairs, but they do not know how to fight a pack that works together. Use that against them." The Altarians moved into position with the silent grace Maya had taught them. She watched them disappear into the shadows and felt a fierce pride in how quickly they had adapted to their new reality. These beings who had never known violence were becoming warriors out of necessity. Maya made her way to the main passage where the predators waited. She could smell them now, a musky odor that reminded her of the great cats that had hunted near her childhood home on the colonies. But there was something else in the air, something that made her human instincts scream warnings. She stepped into the open passage and immediately saw the largest predator she had encountered yet. It stood nearly 10 feet tall, and its muscles rippled beneath fur that was scarred from countless battles. This was clearly the pack leader, and its intelligence showed in the way it studied her approach. The creature did not attack immediately like the others had. Instead, it circled her slowly, testing her reactions and looking for weaknesses. Maya realized that this predator had learned to be cautious, probably through encounters with the automated defenses that had once protected the ruins. She raised her spear and screamed her challenge, but the alpha predator simply continued its stalking. Circle. 4 smaller creatures emerged from side passages to surround her, moving with the coordinated precision of a hunting pack. Maya found herself trapped in the center of a circle of razor-sharp claws and teeth. For a moment, the predators and the humans stared at each other across the space between life and death. Then Maya smiled, showing her own teeth in an expression that was pure predator. "Now," she called out, the Altarians struck from the shadows like avenging spirits, their spears flashing in the dim light as they drove the sharp points deep into the flanks of the surprised creatures. Dr. Keth moved with deadly grace as he hamstrung one predator and then finished it. With a thrust to its spine, Dr. Valen and Dr. Lex worked together to bring down another creature, their scientist minds calculating angles and leverage with lethal precision. The pack leader roared in fury as its hunting formation collapsed, but Maya was already moving toward it with her spear raised high. The creature tried to retreat, but it found itself facing something it had never encountered before, prey that had become the hunter. The battle was brief but vicious. When it ended, 5 predators lay dead in the tunnel, and Maya's pack stood victorious over their bodies. The Altarians looked at each other with expressions of amazement and pride, as if they could not believe what they had just accomplished. "We did it," Dr. Valen said, his voice filled with wonder. "We actually killed them all." Maya wiped the blood from her spear and looked toward the deeper tunnels where their missing colleagues might still be alive. "This was just the beginning," she said. "Now we hunt the rest." Maya led her pack of transformed Altarians through the deepest sections of the ancient ruins, their footsteps silent on the worn stone floors. They moved with the coordinated precision of experienced hunters, each member of the group watching a different sector as they advanced toward the main power chamber. They found Dr. Nera and Dr. Zim barricaded in a side chamber near the power core, using broken furniture and debris to block the entrance. Both scientists were exhausted and terrified, but alive. Dr. Nera had suffered deep claw marks across her arm, while Dr. Zim had a head injury that left him barely conscious. "We thought you were all dead," Dr. Nera whispered as Maya helped her over the barricade. "The creatures have been hunting us for hours. They seem to know these tunnels better than we know our own laboratories." Maya bound Dr. Nera's wounds with strips of cloth torn from her own clothing, while Dr. Keth supported the injured Dr. Zim. The Altarian scientist was badly hurt but still alive, which meant they now had to worry about protecting wounded members of their group while fighting their way to the surface. "How many more of those things are there?" Dr. Lex asked. "We killed at least 8, Maya replied, "but I do not know how many others might be in the ruins. We need to reach the surface before more of them find us." Dr. Valen checked his makeshift spear and looked toward the tunnel that led back to the upper levels. "The route we came down is clear, but those creatures are fast. If they decide to pursue us, we might not be able to outrun them while carrying the wounded." Maya studied the layout of the chamber around them and noticed something she had missed before. The walls here were covered with the same energy conduits they had seen around the crystal in the upper chamber, but these conduits seemed to be connected to the main power systems of the ancient complex. "Dr. Keth," she said, "what would happen if we overloaded the power core in this chamber?" The Altarian scientist looked at the massive crystalline structure that dominated the center of the room. "The energy release would be enormous. It would probably destroy this entire section of the ruins, including any creatures that might be hunting in these tunnels." Maya added. Dr. Keth's large eyes widened as he understood what she was suggesting. "That would also destroy us if we were still in the complex when the overload occurred. Then we make sure we are not here when it happens," Maya said. "Can you create a delayed overload?" Dr. Keth studied the power conduits that snaked across the chamber walls. "Possibly. The control systems are ancient, but the basic principles are similar to our own technology. I could probably jury-rig a feedback loop that would build up over several minutes before reaching critical levels." Maya felt a grim satisfaction as the plan took shape in her mind. They would turn the ancient defenses of the ruins against the predators that had claimed them as territory. It was exactly the kind of solution that required both human determination and Altarian intelligence. "Do it," she ordered. "The rest of us will prepare to move the wounded." Dr. Keth began working on the power conduits while Maya and the others fashioned crude stretchers from debris and torn clothing. Dr. Zim was barely conscious but able to walk with support, while Dr. Nera could move on her own despite her injured. Armed as they worked, Maya heard new sounds echoing from the tunnels around them. Heavy breathing and the scrape of claws against stone told her that more predators were moving through the ruins, probably drawn by the scent of blood from their recent battle. "How much longer?" she asked Dr. Keth. "Almost finished," he replied, his long fingers working with delicate precision on the ancient control systems. "This is actually quite fascinating. The energy storage technology is far more advanced than anything we have developed." A roar echoed from the tunnel entrance, followed by answering calls from other directions. Maya realized that they were about to face a larger pack than any they had encountered before. The predators had finally learned to work together against this new threat. "Time to go," Maya announced. Dr. Keth activated his improvised overload system and joined the group as they prepared to leave the chamber. Maya could already see the power conduits beginning to glow brighter as energy built up in the feedback loop. They had perhaps 5 minutes before the overload reached critical levels. They moved into the tunnels in their practiced formation, with Maya taking point and the others protecting the wounded in the center of the group. The sounds of pursuing predators grew louder behind them, but Maya forced herself to maintain a steady pace instead of rushing toward the surface. The first creature appeared in a side passage, just as they reached the junction that led to the upper levels. Maya killed it with a single spear thrust before it could alert the rest of the pack, but she knew their time was running out. They climbed through the collapsed sections where Maya had first fallen, helping each other over the piles of rubble that blocked the passages. Dr. Zim stumbled and nearly fell, but Dr. Valen caught him and helped him continue climbing. The power core overload was building toward its peak when they finally reached the chamber where the original crystal had triggered the collapse. Maya could feel the vibrations through the stone beneath her feet as massive amounts of energy prepared to tear through the lower levels of the ruins. "The entrance is blocked," Dr. Nera said, pointing to the sealed doorway where they had first entered the complex. Maya studied the massive stone blocks that had fallen to seal the chamber. They were too heavy to move by hand, but the explosion below might be enough to shift them. It would be a close timing, but it was their only chance. "Everyone get as far from the entrance as possible," she ordered. They pressed themselves against the far wall just as the overload reached critical mass. The explosion that followed shook the entire complex and sent cracks racing across the chamber. Ceiling. Several of the blocks sealing the entrance shifted and tumbled away, creating a gap just large enough for them to squeeze through. Maya led them through the opening and into the blessed daylight of Theron 7's surface. Behind them, sections of the ancient ruins collapsed as the energy release destroyed the lower levels and everything that had been hunting in those dark tunnels. They stumbled away from the ruins and activated their emergency beacon, calling for rescue from the research ship in orbit. As they waited, Dr. Keth looked at Maya with an expression of profound respect and curiosity. "How did you know what to do down there?" he asked. "Your people have never encountered predators like those creatures." Maya sat down heavily on a piece of rubble and checked her wounded shoulder. "Every human child learns the same lesson growing up on the frontier worlds," she said. "When something is hunting you, you have 2 choices. You can run and hope it gets tired of chasing you, or you can turn around and hunt it back." Dr. Valen cleaned his makeshift spear with a piece of cloth, his movements showing a new confidence that had not been there before the expedition began. "We always assumed that human aggression was a primitive trait that you would eventually evolve beyond." "Maybe it is primitive," Maya replied. "But primitive does not mean useless. Your people mastered the stars because you never had to learn how to fight for survival. Humans learned to fight before we learned to fly." The rescue ship appeared in the sky above them, its sleek hull gleaming in the alien sunlight. As it descended toward their position, Dr. Keth looked back at the ruined complex where they had nearly died. "We will need to revise our assessment of human capabilities," he said quietly. Our intelligence reports clearly underestimated your species. Maya smiled as she watched the rescue ship land nearby. Your people think intelligence is about solving theoretical problems in controlled environments. Humans learned that real intelligence is about solving immediate problems when everything is trying to kill you. The rescue team that emerged from the ship included both Altarian medics and human security personnel. Maya noticed how the humans immediately began scanning for threats while the Altarians focused on treating the wounded. Both approaches had their place, but it had taken a crisis to show the Altarians that survival sometimes required more than just superior technology. As they boarded the rescue ship, Dr. Keth transmitted his preliminary report to the Altarian Research Council. Maya knew that her actions in the ruins would become part of the official record, studied by xenobiologists and military strategists throughout Altarian space. For the first time since humans had joined the galactic community, they would be seen as something more than primitive newcomers. They would be recognized as survivors, as fighters, as beings who could find solutions when all the sophisticated technology in the universe failed to protect them. Maya looked out through the ship's viewport as Theron 7 fell away beneath them. She had gone to the planet as an observer, tolerated by her sophisticated colleagues, but never truly respected. She was returning as something different, a teacher, who had shown an advanced civilization that sometimes the most important lessons could only be learned in the dark places where death was always just one mistake away. The universe was a dangerous place, and humanity had spent millions of years learning how to survive in it. Now, the rest of the galaxy was beginning to understand why that experience might be the most valuable thing humans had to offer.